I was born in the little town of Gaffney, South Carolina, which is near, I'm about a mile and a half from the Peach. I grew up in the public school system. My sister is a Presbyterian minister in California. My father was the elder of the church that I'm now attending, and my mother and father were both attended Bethesda. I did my undergraduate at Howard and my master's and Ph.D. at the University of South Carolina. And right now I am teaching remotely as an associate professor at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro. And I have a legacy of Presbyterians in my family. My father grew up in a Hopewell Presbyterian Church, which is located about 9 miles from Gaffney in a little town called Blacksburg. And my great uncle was a Presbyterian pastor. His son was a Presbyterian pastor. My sister is a Presbyterian pastor. It's all in the family. So yeah, that's just a brief history of me. Okay. So getting the master's and PhD was a big thrill for me. Learning how to drive was a big thrill for me too when I was 16 or 17. And just the idea of persevering through a master's and PhD program, because it was not easy. It took a lot of sacrifice, but through faith and hard work. General Colin Powell often said that it's, when you're planning for a military mission, it's 80% work and 20% flexibility. And I kind of interpret it as, God's going to give you the 20%, but you've got to put in the 80% for it all to work. So those are a couple of my, things I'm really happy about. Oh, the other thing, I got another one. I am so happy, this is going to sound weird, but I'm so happy that God gave me the opportunity 3 years to take care of my mother before she died. I miss her terribly, but just the privilege of going through that's probably what I'm most proud of, that I was able to take care of her during the pandemic. Yeah, she died in September at 95. But that was a blessing. In fact, I would say that was the biggest blessing that God has given me. I've learned a lot over the past 60 years of being black in a segregated, remembering segregation and its impact on blacks and whites. And, there are some things that I have learned that I hope we can talk about. Memories of my first exposure to racism. Oh, yeah, 1967, Cherokee County school system. I think they had just, South Carolina just went back and forth trying to outlaw desegregation. They lost in the courts, so they finally had to acquiesce and, okay, we got to deal with this. So I was one of the first blacks to integrate the all-white Limestone Elementary School in Gaffney, South Carolina, 1967. And I was one of 5 blacks out of about 100, maybe 400, 500 students. And from the first day, then they had a split up. I was one kid in the first. There was another one in the second, another one in the third, another one in the fourth, another one in the fifth. And I don't know whether they did it intentionally or unintentionally, perhaps intentionally. But we saw each other at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And for 2 or 3 weeks, there was this white kid that kept calling me nigger. I had never heard the word before. I was kind of, what is this? And I remember going over to Blacksburg, Hopewell, with, Sunday dinner with my grandparents. And, innocent 7-year-old kid asked the most logical question. Hey, Daddy, what's a nigger? And it was like, the whole earth stopped. My grandfather looked at him. My grandmother was pulling bread out of the oven. It's like, it's like everything just stopped. What is he going to say? And he said, why did you ask me that question? And I said, well, this white kid's been calling me that for the past 2 weeks. And he lit in, my father's very cool, calm, and collected, except on that day when his son encountered racism for the first thing in his life. Well, this is what you're going to tell him. He just got all irate. My mother said, nah, Cooper, we're not going to do that. My mother was a teacher at the all-black junior high school in Gaffney. I'm going to talk with the teacher. So and ironically, I don't blame the kid. It's just what his parents had heard him say. And that's what you call these people. So my mother I remember it like yesterday. My mother had this parent-teacher meeting. We came out of the meeting, and the teacher, bless her heart, said, Miss Smith, we've got to teach. This is a new day. We've got to teach these kids how to interact with each other. And I'm glad you brought this to my attention. And then she said, I'm amazed that a housewife like you would have enough sense to bring this to my attention. And I said, wow. And my mother said, I'm not a domestic worker. I'm a high school teacher, junior high school teacher, just like you are. I'm licensed to teach in this county as well. So she took me home, and I don't know whether she buried that or she didn't say anything about it, but 2 weeks later she asked me, how are things at school? She said, well, everybody's playing with me now. And that's what was most important to her, that her son was finally being respected. Yeah, so that's my introduction to racism. The foundation that Hopewell, where my father came from, was just amazing. The things that they were taught: discipline, self-worth, self-respect. These were a group of black farmers, and in their spare time, they used to haul rock out of the bottom near a creek bed to build a church, a rock church, in their spare time. It took years, but that was 85, 90 years ago, and that church is still standing. Mm-hmm. But out of that church, that community became an international opera star who was a cousin. I have an aunt who was, remember the NASA and Hidden Figures? My aunt was a hidden figure with the National Security Agency. She was a cryptologist who deciphered Russian intelligence during the Cold War. Chinetta Gamble. You can look her up. She's in Google. Chinetta Smith Gamble. And all these people just came out of that small little Hopewell Presbyterian community in Blacksburg. And, my father left there on the GI Bill to get his degree in English. At first he went to Korea as a soldier, where he faced a lot of segregation. I won't go into all of that, but he persevered and got his education with the GI Bill at A&T, where I'm teaching now. And then there's my grand uncle, who was the dean of the School of Technology at A&T. All of them came out of Hopewell. So, and then there's my sister. She's a Presbyterian pastor, has her own church in Orange, California. So how could I go wrong? Wow, all this amazing foundation. There was a wonderful article by John Blake, who was a racially mixed kid, grew up hating his white mother and aunt. And he's just written a book talking about how he worked through that hatred. Well, not only he hated them, but they hated him as well, until they kind of worked through their difficulties. And he mentioned a theory called contact theory, which was coined about 5-6 years ago by a Harvard professor. So contact theory proposes that the key to eliminating prejudice is through institutional support, commitment, common values, and what was the last one? Institutional support, common values, commitment, and equal status. That was it. So, and that is not just for black churches, that's for white churches too. Because we still remain the most segregated institution. Although we're working on it, we're getting better at it. But we have to have more interpersonal relationships. And let me add a media literacy focus to that. A related theory is called agenda setting. Agenda setting basically says, the media don't tell you what to think, but it tells you what to think about. Now let that sink in for a moment. If your perceptions of people are based on media stereotypes, how are you going to react? Because all you see in the media are black men as thugs, and all we see in the media of white people is Appalachian people who drink moonshine all the time and drink beer and say the N-word. We're not getting anywhere. So we need to start learning examples of media literacy so you can discern what the media is saying and start addressing or at least understanding where you get your perceptions. The truth. Nobody wants to deal with the truth. Truth is and that's just not a white thing, it's a human thing. Nobody wants to deal with the truth. And once you deal with the truth, that's the first step toward healing, isn't it? You have to face the fact that we were victims, that there were perpetrators and victims of racism, and that it still exists. And once you acknowledge that, then you can go about changing the narrative. But you can't change the narrative until you understand what the problem is. Now, I mean, that's more simply said than done, but that's generally what we're talking about, right? You have to change the narrative so that the media changes the narrative. The media is only reflecting what it sees in society. And once people become media literate, they become more discerning. And then they'll think about, okay, how can we change this narrative? Maybe things aren't as bad as what they seem to be. It's just it's so much amplified by that camera. Turn off that phone. Get to know your neighbor and become interpersonal again. It goes back to contact theory. And this isn't a problem of blacks and whites. I would tell this to black folk too. Don't make the assumptions about him or her that have been magnified by media through stereotypes and misperceptions. And you'll find out that your problems aren't much different than mine. I think that's the solution. So if I were telling white people something about it, I would be telling black people the same thing too. I didn't know about Crispus Attucks. I didn't know about Malcolm X. I didn't know about John Lewis. I knew a lot about Strom Thurmond and Ernest Hollings and Governor Dick Riley, but I didn't know anything about I.D. Quincy Newman, who was a Methodist minister in Columbia, who became the first the South Carolina Supreme Court Justice. I didn't know anything about Thurgood Marshall. But it was at Howard where I was introduced to things that were a part of me. And by no means am I dissing the Cherokee County school system. There were some wonderful English teachers who taught me a lot, who were progressive, who were trying to make change in the curriculum. I don't think we had a Black history or we didn't have a Black studies program from my K through 12. I was one of the first group that integrated the school system. It was the first group that spent 12 years together, from first grade through 12th. I went to a 40th high school reunion about 5 years ago. And there were these people that, a handful of them were in my first grade class. And one of my classmates, a white woman, came, Kim, I just wanted to say, I remember those first 3 weeks at Central Elementary. It wasn't Limestone, it was Central Elementary, where we didn't play with you. I don't think she knew about the story with the N-word, but she said, I want to let you know that how you handled that was amazing to me. And I've been meaning to tell you that I really appreciate how you dealt with all those pressures. And that just brought a tear to my eye. That somebody actually recognized the strain that put me through. We've got to go to lunch with each other. We've got to attend church together. We've got to talk about racism. We've got to talk about prejudice. We have to sit down. It's just like a marriage, isn't it?
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's not. I didn't say it was going to be easy. No, I didn't say it was going to be easy, but that's what you have to do.